Well, welcome to what is a very special on-farm yarn where we are literally here in the paddock. And that is, of course, for those who haven't been able to get along to one of the wonderful Pasture Partners on-farm days that are held by Fonterra Farm Source along with their partners. As we are here today talking about maximising homegrown feed, I'm here with Julie Morris, who is the Environment Lead for Fonterra Farm Source, Mark Shand, who is here from Barenbrug and the Pasture Systems Manager, and Aimer's Jeremy Bryant, the founder and CTO of Aimer. It's exciting as we are here to be able to dive into growing efficient homegrown feed and, of course, the practical tips that ultimately lead to increased sustainability, profitability, and, of course, productivity. So, Julie, why does growing efficient pasture matter?
So firstly, Sarah, that's the question I'd love to ask our farmers, because I think farmers really get it and they understand and are great at explaining why pasture and homegrown feed is so important to their farm, their business, and to these ladies out behind us here. But from simply speaking from me, maximising or increasing what we grow and harvest on farm increases our productivity, profitability and sustainability. What I mean by that is by increasing what we grow and eat on farm, or increasing that energy harvested per hectare on farm. It enables us to increase our production from the same amount of inputs to our system, or alternatively, we can maintain our production and reduce the inputs. So both of those pathways increase our on-farm efficiency and ultimately the key outcomes of profitability, sustainability and productivity.
So when it comes to profitability, Julie, how much extra are we talking with homegrown feed?
So if we look at, for example, lifting homegrown feed eaten by 0.5 tonne per hectare, we know that we can achieve an extra kind of 50 to 60 milk solids, kilograms of milk solid per hectare. So ultimately, we are increasing our milk in the vat or milk revenue for no additional inputs, or alternatively, we can maintain that milk production and reduce the inputs required to do it. So therefore, reducing cost on farm. We know from Dairy NZ's dairy base economic figures for farming that of all the metrics that we look at, the performance metrics that we look at across dairy businesses, that homegrown feed eaten or pasture and crop eaten is the metric with the strongest correlation to profit. From that information, Dairy NZ estimate based on figures from a number of years and a number of systems that for every additional 1 tonne of pasture and crop eaten on farm, it's associated with an increase in operating profit of $300 per hectare.
Well, it all sounds really simple, Mark, but of course we need to make sure that we establish and grow the pasture to get the yields that we need as well. So what are the ways that we can grow more pasture?
Selecting the right pasture for your farm is so important. You're essentially buying a perennial crop that you're going to be harvesting consistently for the next few years. You have a huge range of diploids and tetraploids and now hybrids that you can choose from. You'll be looking at seasonal growth, persistency, endophyte that can all make a huge difference to how they're going to perform where you're farming.
You make a good point. There is a huge range of different perennials. And so with these new hybrid tetraploids, what are the benefits?
Yeah, so some of the new tetraploids that have been, or hybrids that have been coming to the market lately, have really, really good annual growth. So they can really help you out in those pinch times where you're a bit short of feed. They are more persistent than they have been in the past, and they're better quality over the summer as well. But being a tetraploid as well, over diploid, every mouthful of feed that your cows are going to be eating will have higher quality and higher energy to give you more milk in the vat.
And I can only imagine that growing it is one thing, managing it is so crucially important as well, Mark.
Yes, that's probably the biggest thing that you're going to need to manage or do to increase your feed eaten on farm. Managing your pasture is just critical. So right from the start, prepping your paddock correctly so the seeds that you sow are at the right depth and the right amount, so you're going to get a nice dense pasture that won't be full of weeds is just so important. And then once it's established, it's going to come up and you're just going to need to ensure you do the nip-off graze correctly and then get it into your pasture or farm rotation as fast as possible. And then going in and grazing at the right pre-graze residual and then graze down to the right level is going to be important, that it doesn't or it bounces back from each grazing and it's going to persist for years to come.
Do you reckon you could show us, Mark?
Yes, sure. Yeah, so getting out and having a look in the paddock and seeing what growth stage your pasture is at. So your ryegrass is a 3-leaf plant, so it's going to have your residual leaf, and then this plant has put up its first leaf, which is this one, its second one, which is coming from inside that. This is actually going to grow bigger than your first leaf, and then it will put up a third leaf as well, which will grow bigger again. So if you can graze at that 2.5 to 3 leaf stage, you're going to be maximising your yield and also the quality. Then grazing down to a consistent residual is also really important. So if we graze this off, your plants are going to grow back from this tiller here, but also you're allowing these daughter tillers to have space and light to grow as well, which is going to provide feed through the summer and autumn as well, which is critical for growing more feed on farm. So most New Zealand farmers are good grass managers and are utilising most of their feed, but we want them to become even better and become really good grass managers. That's going to give them 5% more utilisation, which will grow more feed per annum and can convert that into milk solids, but plus you're also going to improve your pasture quality that's going to be intaken by the cows. That extra ME is also going to give you an increase in milk production for your season.
Obviously, when we have high quality feed, it's important to be able to maximise it, to measure it. And we have, you hear Jeremy from Aimer. Why is it important to make sure that we are measuring pasture intake into the cows?
It's very important, obviously, to measure, to understand, what the animals are down their throat, how much they're leaving behind, and that's really key for decision making on farm. But that's a challenge. It takes a lot of time. So there's technologies that can take 3 or 4 hours to do that measurement, such as plate meters, which has been around since the 1990s. Satellites sort of came along as the hope, to have that completely automated, but we've got a lot of cloud cover in New Zealand, so you can't always get that and the accuracy's not there. So we really came up with the concept that everyone's got a smartphone. Why can't we use a smartphone to measure that pasture? So the farmer will go out, do a scan, 360-degree twirl, we call it, they aim a twirl, and then measure the pasture via that, and they get that result in seconds. So we've been developing that. And then naturally those farmers said, I've got a drone that I'm currently using to look at the troughs. Can I now pop up the drone? So we're working on that integration as well, where the drone will go from paddock to paddock measuring the pasture.
Do you reckon you could show us, Jeremy?
Yes. So what the farmer will do, they'll just have their camera out like this. They just press the record button. Then they'll just scan the pasture like this. Stop recording, and then within seconds it will come up with the pasture mass for the paddock. So the farmer can see the average cover on their phone here. They can then see the optimisation score. It's giving them a recommendation of what they can do to improve the situation. So here for a surplus, for example. And then they can see the grazing plan for the next 3 days. So any farm staff can be looking at that.
Wow. So you have made it super simple to be able to manage just around what Julie and Mark have been talking about, but all with what's already in our pocket. And so when will this be available to farmers?
So that Aimer, what we call Aimer Vision, which we call the sort of the digital eyes, we're developing that now for rollout in about February of next year. Yep, certainly for the smartphone first and the drone a little bit later. But what we have now, through the partnership with Fonterra Farm Source, the farmers can get the digital brain, which is Aimer itself, which will actually then take that information of the measurement, analyse their feed wedge, give them some recommendations on what they should do next. It allows them to also not measure all the paddocks, so it's got AI-based learning in there, so it knows about the paddocks and it will grow those up. So just big time saving, and then it goes a step further around then auto-generating grazing plans for each of the mobs, so you know where the cows should go on what day to communicate to staff.
Well, dairy farming's just got one more step easier. I think what I'm really taking away from this on-farm yarn is just how important Fonterra Farm Source's partnerships are to be able to make sure that we've got the right tools and solutions for farmers around some things that may seem complex but can be actually made quite simple, Julie.
Yeah, so I think we talk about the concept of increasing homegrown feed as being a simple concept. A lot of the things that Mark has spoken about we can simply grow more, we can improve the quality, or we can improve the utilisation of that. So very simple concepts, but in reality are very challenging to implement on farm. But it's something our farmers do every day. Improving homegrown feed eating is about small steps or incremental gains, and farmers need to use all of the support and the tools and the products that are available to really maximise on that. And that's what our partnerships and advice and conversation here today is about.
It's fantastic to see it all pulled together too when you look at your farm insights reports and you're able to not only benchmark yourself year on year but also among your closest neighbours too, Julie.
Yeah, so the Farm Insights report uses the data that farmers provide us to give them some information on their performance on farm. So for pasture and crop eaten, it compares their farm to their 100 closest neighbours, which takes out some of that kind of climate and landscape variability that makes it really hard to understand, where you're at. So the information also shows pasture and crop relative to nitrogen inputs, so gives some information on how efficiently those inputs are being converted to homegrown feed eaten. But most importantly, enables you to look at your farm relative to your neighbours, or if there's some untapped potential there in terms of what can be grown and eaten on farm.
I really love that it's relative to inputs on farm and converting that into feed grown as well. Really important around things like nitrogen inputs and how the Farm Insight report plays into the sustainability of the 3 prongs you spoke at the start.
I guess the first cab off the rank when we talk about sustainability or efficiency on farm is making the most of the resources that we grow on farm. So when we look at those 2 pathways I've spoken about in terms of increasing our production on farm from existing inputs or maintaining our production from reduced inputs, both have great sustainability outcomes. Looking specifically at nitrogen, if we're looking to reduce the nitrogen wastage in our system, so by increasing production on farm, we're increasing the nitrogen that's exported from our farm as product, as protein and milk. The alternative pathway, if we're maintaining production from less inputs, we're bringing less nitrogen in the gate. Both of those pathways reduce the nitrogen surplus in our system, therefore reduce the nitrogen at risk of being lost to the environment.
And of course, emissions targets for the co-op is actually not that far away, and I imagine really plays into this as well.
From an emissions perspective, increasing productivity on farm means that we are spreading our emissions footprint over more milk, so more kilograms of milk solids. So that reduces our emissions intensity, which is good for the farm and good for the co-op on our journey to our 2030 target. If we are maintaining our production but reducing the inputs that we use to achieve that, we're reducing the total emissions footprint of our business. So both of those things are good for our farmers and good for our co-op.
Jeremy, how would the likes of Aimer work with farmers in the Farm Insight report data?
Yeah, so what they might do is they might identify that they're not performing as well as their peers around the district through that Farm Insight report around pasture and crop eaten. So then they might identify, okay, we want to focus on improving that. That's one of the big drivers of the business. And then Aimer would come as that digital assistant that would work with their farm staff, with the manager, so they get that full visibility, and it will give them tips to really increase that profit, that maximising utilisation of the pasture. It gives them an optimisation score, so it actually at any time they can see how optimised their feed wedge is, and they can play out scenarios, see the feed wedge over the next 2 weeks to work out, okay, how can I get to 100%? So there's sort of a gaming element that they can then see them getting there, and certainly when the farmers see that they get their first 100% for optimisation, it's very good to bringing up to speed and really maximising that use of pasture.
I can imagine they'd like to do the same with the cultivars too, Mark, and see what's working and what's not.
Yeah, so having the ability to see at a paddock level which cultivars are performing is just really important. You'll be able to start to understand what your poor performing paddocks are, and those are the ones that you're going to select to replace and put something new in. Some of these modern cultivars are growing significantly more than some of the cultivars that were sort of 10 years ago or even less than that. So if you can pick the right paddock to replace, that's where you're going to get your biggest return from with these new pastures.
if a farm identifies they've got an opportunity in their farm insights report, that opportunity might be for the farm to grow more, so increase their overall yield, and that's where they might work with likes of Barenbrug to understand the cultivars and whether they are getting the best performance out of what they have on farm. It might be around improving the quality, and again, utilising tools such as Aimer to understand, pasture management and quality opportunities on farm, or it might be about utilisation. So again, focusing in on the pasture management practices that really maximise, every mouthful of feed.
So really it is that simple, to have an on-farm yarn in a paddock to bring you the tips and solutions from Fonterra Farm Sources partners, Barenbrug and Aimer, to grow more grass through varieties of different hybrids, tetraploids and diploids, making sure that we're managing our grass properly through the Aimer technology and of course Aimer Vision coming in 2025, all thanks to Farm Sources TSRs that are on the ground being able to assist you and what are the right tools specifically for your farm and your location. We hope you enjoyed our on-farm yarn where you've learnt more around some tips and solutions brought together by Farm Source and their partners. If you'd like to know more, reach out to your local Farm Source TSR or head to the website nzfarmsource.co.nz.